Hello and welcome to another episode of Repeat That Again, Please. Now, this is the first video episode, so if you want to watch on video, you can do that. But I'm so glad that you've joined me for the start of season 2. Now, I didn't think the break was going to go on for as long as it did. If you're not listening to this in order, then this will make no sense to you. But if you are listening to this podcast in order, then you will know that I've been off. So I'm really, really glad to be back, and glad to be back with an amazing guest. Now, my guest has been featured in Harper's Bazaar, Stylist Magazine, and Psychology's. Her acclaimed book, Women Who Work Too Much, Breaking Free from Toxic Productivity and Finding Their Joy, serves as a guide for women seeking liberation from society's relentless expectations. Tamu Thomas is an author, transformational coach, and thought-provoking keynote speaker. Now, she champions well-being and success of high-achieving women. She has a mission to dismantle societal and systemic barriers that lead to burnout. And she encourages women to cultivate lives that feel deeply fulfilling and aligned with their values. So, of course, today we are talking all about joyful and positive productivity. We covered relationships and loads of other things that I think align so well with her work and her coaching. Now, Tamu in a previous life was a social worker, and she draws that into her modern day coaching as well as her somatic coaching. And I'm really interested in somatics and the movement of the body and the mind connection. And so she encourages women to embody their power by setting really, really strong boundaries and to lead with authenticity and empathy. And I think these themes tie in so much with what Repeat That Again, Please is all about. It's how do we continue on the journey of self-improvement so that we can become all the things that we want to be. I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you so much for joining me today, Tamu.
Thank you for having me, Genelle.
So we're going to dive straight into the questions because we were meant to have this conversation in December and then another time in January. Nothing ever before the time. And I think the question that I was going to start with in December still feels really pertinent now, which is 2025. It just felt like such a year of change. And there were so many people feels like there's a new energy. It's like there's this big shift. And I think everybody felt that, like a collective thing.
Yes.
Then when 2025 hit and all that's transpired has transpired, and they who shall not be named, I think it's shaped a lot of how things are now happening in that collective feeling. And, what do you think is that shaping it? Is it helping it? Is it harming it? That kind of collective good energy. What are your thoughts on where we are with that now?
Oh, Genelle, starting with a real rocket launcher of a question. For me, I am more resolute in minding my business and focusing on what I need to do at this moment in time, not just to achieve what I want to achieve, but also to experience what I want to experience. What I can see happening in many parts of the collective, I won't say that it's absolutely everywhere, is something I see time and time again. Destructive forces create hysteria, and we chomp at the bit and become hysterical. And rather than being organized as a collective, there's shock, which is right, but we don't pause. We go straight into reactivity and broadcasting, amplifying the narrative that people who want to cause us harm want to be disseminated through social media, through the media, and in other channels. And what I think needs to happen is that we've seen this playbook before. We need to pause so that we can be discerning and make powerful choices about how we're going to respond rather than reacting from our survival physiology. Because they have done a whole load of study to make sure they're jacking up our nervous systems, disempowering us. So rather than making progress, we're constantly reacting to what's going on. I get it, and I'm not saying this as a criticism, but I'm saying we've seen this, we know the drill. we need to move differently. We need to stop being so predictable as a collective.
And I think it's so interesting. So the other day I posted on Instagram, just kind of like, joy is part of the resistance. Like, we have to understand that they are in our world as much as we are in theirs. And I think what you're saying is so true when it comes to, they pull us in and we go with it,
Yes.
rather than saying, well, actually, this is not your world. This is our world. This is all of
Yeah.
our world. And there's actually more of us than there are of other people. And there's
Yes.
more of you. Yes, you're very powerful, but if we actually came together, we would be very powerful. But it's kind of that thing of, I remember I was trying to buy a house once and I was quite young and I didn't do it. And I remember going to view somewhere and the estate agent said to me, have you got a mortgage? And I was like, have you got a mortgage lined up? And I was like, no. And she said, okay, sweetheart, first thing you want to do is see how much money the bank will give you. She said, because you don't want to be a busy fool. And I think it's so
Oh my
interesting to,
goodness. Can you say that line again?
it's so interesting to think you can be a busy fool. Like, I can be looking for houses, thinking about sofas, thinking about carpet, excited about how I'm going to be entertaining, all of these things. Where do I want to live? Look at I don't even know what I can afford at this point, which
Yeah.
was actually nothing at the time. So, it's a really, really interesting concept that you say, that we can get drawn into
Yeah.
hysteria. And what that then leads to is just us kind of, we're in such a state of chaos that they can just do anything
Yeah.
because we're like in disarray.
Yeah. We become shock absorbers rather than observing it. And it's like playing a game of tug of war. Well, if I stop tugging, you're going to fall down. We have to stop playing tug of war with our attention. Divert your attention to where it needs to be. I can't remember the quote in full, but Toni Morrison taught us time ago. The very function of racism is distraction. The very function of all of this stuff is distraction. Let us not be distracted. Let us be focused. Let us be organized. Let us be unionized. Let us move in tandem rather than running around being busy fools.
And it's so interesting because it is constant. The cycle of bad news is absolutely constant. And as a former journalist myself, and something I feel quite strongly about, people say to me sometimes, why don't you read the news anymore? And I said, you don't even want to watch the news. Why would you want to read it every day? Like, it's,
Mhm.
for me, it's like that kind of thing. But it's a constant cycle.
Yeah.
How do we give ourselves permission to hold on to joy when it almost feels like it's inappropriate? Because when you look at the constantness of, this right's been taken away, this book has been banned, this is going on over here, this is going on over there in this country, it's like this political party, they've become the most, it's never ending. And so sometimes it feels like you want to just enjoy a moment, you want to post something on Instagram like, I had a nice meal or I had a nice time, and it just
Yeah.
feels like, oh, it feels just
Yeah.
so, oh. How do we hold on to our joy?
First of all, we have to recognize joy for what it is. So, a lot of people treat joy like it's frivolous happiness, it's momentary. Well, no, actually, when I first started my business, it was all about joy. And I started to see patterns that were disrupting people's ability to have joy as part of their lives. And I love words. And when I'm really hooked on a word, I look up the meaning. And so I came across a biblical encyclopedia called Theopedia, and it talked about joy being a state of mind, an orientation of the heart, a settled state of confidence, contentment, and hope, something along those lines. Joy is something you be as opposed to something you do. So, first of all, we have to come away from this capitalistic way of thinking, like joy is some kind of commodity that we have or we don't have it. Actually, joy is within us. We can tap into joy. It takes us being discerning and it takes us being intentional. So, we have to move away from joy being something we can have here and there and making it something we can weave in. And I use an example of when my aunt suddenly died in 2020. There was shock, there was grief, there was dismay. And when I remembered her, there was also joy. We can hold multiple things at once. So we need to remember that it is not black or white. It is not this or that. It is not binary. It is nuanced. We operate on a spectrum. So we have to remember that. And we also have to think, who benefits when we don't feel good? Why has there been such emphasis placed on commodifying ourselves, extracting from ourselves, being productive at all costs, and no emphasis on the things that help us feel good and actually be productive in a way that is meaningful, caring, kind, supportive, expansive. So we need to do a little bit of critical thinking. Another thing, I encourage us to actually stop thinking about joy, rest, and all of those things as a form of resistance. They are our divine birthright. And the word divine might put some people off because they think I'm talking about some woo woo manifestation business or something deeply religious. But we are more than skin and bone. The fact that science tells us there was a 400 trillion in one chance of you being born tells us that there's a little bit more than 2 and 2 equals 4 going on, because also 7 minus 3 equals 4. So when we remember that actually we are here to enjoy ourselves as well as the other things, and when you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, you will recognize actually work is a way we meet our needs so we can enjoy ourselves. These things we do are ways we can meet our needs, meet ourselves, and free ourselves up to have the capacity to enjoy ourselves. So think to yourself, why does the leadership system I exist within benefit from me not feeling joyful, not feeling energized, not being powerful? Because you will go along with the status quo. You won't disrupt anything. You won't challenge. You won't ask questions. You won't actually start to do things that make change. You just go along, post something on social media about how terrible the Labour leadership is, and then trundle on with your ordinary life. So I want us to take a moment and think. And then I want you to scan your memory for the way your life was different, or the moments feeling good inside your bones has made your life different, has made your life feel better. And then
I guess
you've got a tangible example of why joy, feeling good, is essential.
for business owners, for entrepreneurs, it can be really tricky in this time to actually show up and to kind of market yourself, because there's this kind of all this big stuff going on that's like macro, and then you're here selling a service or a product which might feel in juxtaposition with what's going on. Okay, there's people over here starving, dying, we're seeing wars, we're seeing peace being struck or not. Here I am selling a coaching session, but at the same time, if you don't sell this, you have no money because it's your job and your business. How do we navigate that tension between staying visible but actually still staying sensitive to what we're
Yeah.
seeing occurring? Because you don't just want to be like, well, I don't care about what's going on, like I've got things to sell. How do we navigate that tension?
Well, first and foremost, if we were two men having this conversation, it would not be going like that, okay? And I'm not going to say that all men, but the vast majority of men. I remember when Roe v. Wade was overturned in America, women across the world, it was a shock to all of us, because if in the so-called world's most democratic country something like that can happen, it makes us question how safe our rights are in any country. So I get that. But there were people who were operating as if we should slow down what we're doing because it's insensitive. If all of a sudden men were forced to take the pill or something, they would still be doing their business whilst they're doing whatever. So this is very gendered. It is very much about the way women are conditioned to please, to fawn, and be codependent. We are not conditioned to operate from power, because we're so used to a structure of power over rather than power with and power to, that for women, operating in power automatically means power over, and that's not what women are supposed to be like. That's unladylike. That makes you a bitch. You're not a nice person. And as a woman, you need to prioritize being liked. You need to prioritize positivity over progress. So we need to recognize that it is very, very gendered. When the Queen died, again, people were like, oh, should I be selling? Should I not be selling? I went to Sainsbury's. It was open. People were up and down the aisles buying baked beans, bread, and goodness else knows what. We have to recognize when we are in business, we are in business. We can't be fair weather with our business. But as you said, we can be sensitive to what's going on around us. So Would that be the time to be sharing an Instagram reel about how much money you made that day and now you're on the private jet to Dubai sipping on cocktails with strappy sandals on? Maybe not. Is there something else you could share? It seems like all the time there's something breaking news, breaking news, breaking news. But what I do is I acknowledge what's going on and say, we still need to show up. So it's about how you're showing up rather than not showing up at all. And something I find very interesting is that I notice that the people who are very preoccupied with how they are perceived by other people, they tend to be the people who are ready to say, okay, we can't show up today when something happens, because it is validating a subconscious fear of being visible. It is validating a subconscious fear of quote unquote breaking the rules.
I think it is quite gendered. And I was talking to this guy the other day and I was, just talking and I was like, oh, so what's something about you that you don't really like? And he just looked at me very blankly. He didn't understand the question because that thought is not going on in his mind. Whereas if you ask a woman, tell me about a few traits you've got. I mean, we could probably list 3 to 5 to 10. And like you say, that's very gendered. It's not that
Yes,
simple. But at the same time, you can just see how we are really taught to always be thinking the ladylike thing,
yes,
very much so. And I know that men have their own version with like what masculinity
absolutely.
looks like.
Yeah,
But I saw one of your posts the other day, and I know we've spoken about it, about being unrelatable and being
yeah,
remarkable. And I think
yeah.
there's so much pressure on women to be relatable. I definitely felt that. It's kind of tethered to not being too big for your boots, kind of
Hmm.
tethered to who do you think you
Showing
are,
off.
also tethered to, don't forget where you came from, and every other iteration of that. And I think it comes from men and women. So I'm not even going to say
Yes,
that it's coming necessarily from men. It's coming from men. It's coming from women. And I think it's just, how can we shift our mindset to really embrace standing out instead of shrinking to fit? Because I think, again, it comes down to that thing. We have to show we care. So showing
yes,
that you care means giving lots of space to everybody else
yes.
rather than taking up space yourself. How can we shift that mindset a bit? And also, how do we shift that generally, not just in ourselves, but in society? Because you can't just shift it in yourself. That doesn't
Yeah.
actually in and of itself solve the problem.
I think of it like a plant. If you put a plant in a pot that's too small, it's not going to grow and thrive. And actually, it's probably going to get root rot and wither and die. We can make it really complicated if we want to, or we can keep it all the way simple. Human beings evolved to stand up. We're not supposed to be bending and shrinking and bowing all the time. It doesn't support our physiology. So we're supposed to stand up. Thinking about your physiology again, it is much kinder on your body to stretch and reach up, even if it's a little bit more than what you can, than to constantly bend down. So there's my somatics and biology out of the way. But to be quite frank, I could create all kinds of narrative for you, Genelle. Frankly, for me, it is far more painful to shrink myself, to swallow back, to hold back, than it is to stand up as I'm supposed to be. When I don't show up as I am, I'm abandoning myself, and it feels like I put myself in the naughty corner and I'm ignoring myself. And what I had to do to be able to get to that place was recognize that not everybody, not every circumstance can be for me. It's
Mm.
as simple as that. And there are some people who, just by the way I show up in the world, will be offended by that because it activates something they're not owning within themselves. I can't shrink to fit that because I do myself a lot of damage. There are some people who may listen and think it's arrogant because we're not used to people being self assured. I'm grounded in who I am. I'm somebody from a young age. So my mum started following me on Instagram when my book first came out because she said I wasn't updating the family WhatsApp group enough. So she sees some of the things I post. And I shared something about speaking. Somebody had asked me something about speaking, something like that. And my mum replied to my Instagram story and said, You've always been like that. And she recounted a story about something I did when I was 7. There was another time that we were talking about like me and leadership. And she said, yeah, in nursery, I was always organizing the games. I would be the person that was saying, this is what we're going to do. And words like bossy would be used about me. That's who I am. When I start trying to be relatable, I'm dishonoring myself. I'm not being true to myself. I'm people pleasing. I can't remember exactly which post you're talking about, but there was a post where I was like, F being relatable. I'd
It was
had a
that one.
conversation with somebody and they were basically encouraging me to show up a bit more like an influencer on social media. So sharing more of my personal life and this and that. And I was like, I've never been here for that. I'm not going to show you the inside of my kitchen. If I happen to have an idea and I quickly create a video whilst I'm there, fine. But I'm not here to be an influencer. I'm a person of influence. And I know that because comments people make about me all the time is, you're so inspirational. I learned so much from you. You're so wise. This isn't me being cocky. This is facts. If that's who I'm supposed to be, if I start to say, come with me whilst I go to buy a new bra, I'm dishonoring myself. That's just not how I roll. And if
And I
you
think
don't like it, I am quite content, seriously, with being the villain in your story. That's fine.
it is about how do you want to show up? That is it for you. Because to some people, influencers going out showing their bra is unrelatable. They're like, I just couldn't imagine. And
Yeah.
then some people are like, oh my God, that's amazing. I think we have never quite circled the square about the fact we are all unique.
Yes.
We're all so different. So in a sense, nobody's relatable. No one is going to get the inside of your mind as you get the inside of your mind. They'll get a version of it as they see it,
Yeah.
as it relates to them.
Yeah.
But it's because we struggle between either we're all the same or we're all the same and there's a few people that are outliers and they're different. But
Yeah.
the reality of it is we all view the world in such an individualistic way. How can you be relatable? I think the difference is some people's lives are very public and the things they do are very visible. And some people are way more private. I never forget once, this was years ago, and I used to be on the telly. This is when Facebook was a thing, and I was sharing about my job. And someone messaged me privately, oh, you're always talking about what you're doing. And in my head, I just thought, well, one, that's really rude. But two, everyone is on Facebook sharing what they're doing. So
Yeah.
why is what I'm doing so troublesome? It's because it's different. It's because it's the TV, or it's because it's something that people feel is quote unquote unrelatable, because then TV
Mm.
definitely like it is now. You didn't know so many people are on telly.
Yes.
And I always found that really interesting, that people will often use the unrelatable. Actually, what they're saying is that is unattainable to me.
For
Not,
them.
yeah. That's where often that's coming from. This is
Yeah.
unattainable. This makes me
Yeah.
feel uncomfortable. And I
Yes.
think I know I have fallen into that trap of then going, oh, okay, I'm clearly making people feel uncomfortable with the things I'm doing. Let me maybe not share that, or maybe
Yeah.
let me not.
Yeah.
And actually, in the end, like you say, it just makes you feel badly about the things you're doing. It makes you not go after the things that you want to do, the bigger, better things than what you're doing right
Yeah.
now, than what you want. Now you can't go after that, because if this is too much for everyone, good God, dare I shine a bit
Yeah.
more? And you just see it all the time. And I've seen it in myself, I've seen it in others. And the big push, I asked this again, another guy, how do you cope with people, thinking that you're controversial? It's like, oh, I just don't hear it.
Literally just the other day,
Wow.
I saw on TikTok somebody posted something about people with a platform reading stuff about themselves on Reddit. And the person whose TikTok it was said something like, you're on the stage, why are you going to the gutter? It wasn't exactly that, but it was something along those
Yeah.
lines. And what I want to add to this piece of the conversation we're having is, I am center stage of my life. You are center stage of your life. If you are not comfortable being center stage of your life, it means that you are letting everyone and everything take center stage in your life, and you are putting yourself not even in the audience, or you are, but you're in the bleachers, you're right in the back, in the rafters. Who else is supposed to be center of your life? That's why I called my company Live 360, because I recognized that at the height of my burnout, I wasn't in the middle of my life. I wasn't looking at my life in its full 360 degrees. I was literally on the periphery looking at a small section that I thought was palatable to the outside world. And it compromised my health. I will not do that again. So it's all well and great we're having this conversation and us thinking about it from a very cognitive place, but it impacts our health. It impacts our physical, emotional, and psychological health. It makes us ill. And people in more kind of like spiritual communities will talk about it creating dis-ease. When I was operating like that, Genelle, it wouldn't be uncommon for me to have a cold that lasted from September right through to March. And it would peak laryngitis, bronchitis, sinusitis. I would be in real pain. There would not be 1 year that went by without me having flu that would wipe me out, and I would be exhausted for months afterwards. I was an early adopter of COVID. I got COVID in January 2020, and it took me until it was a couple of weeks before lockdown when I felt like myself again, and I started going back to the gym. And I remember each time going to the gym, it becoming more and more empty as the news about COVID. And I was just so excited to have energy and be back. So it really impacted my physical health. It impacted my mental health as well. I was having conversations with my doctor about anxiety and depression, and I didn't take the medication they were offering me because I knew it was way more nuanced and complex than I have got a mental health challenge that requires medication. I knew it was different to that. And so I'm saying that because I want you to know this isn't just a conversation. This isn't just thinking different. You need to be different. And one of the first things I had to practice, and it's a continuous practice because of how we human beings are designed, I had to practice letting people be wrong about me. I had to practice letting people misunderstand me, because when I'm wasting time trying to correct them, explain myself, or, whatever else, what I am doing is telling myself that justifying my very being to these people is more important than me being who I need to be. And what I could see from that was, even when I did, like Genelle, you're a magnetic person, so you know this. Even when I'm just being my ordinary self, people who are denying who they are, I will rub up against them, because it's not that they don't have the capacity, but they can see something in me that they're not owning. And then they're projecting the fact that they're not owning it onto me. And it turns into, who do you think you are? What you're doing is unattainable. No, what I'm doing is not unattainable. You have decided you can't do it. And now you're angry with me because I'm doing something that you think you could do. And not only do you think you could do it, you think you could do it better. And you're not doing it.
And you should just go and do it, because then you would feel happier in yourself. And I think
See?
that is it's a really, really tricky thing about relationships. And, last year, I really made a conscious effort to declutter my life, including reevaluating relationships that weren't aligning with my goals. And I think it's a really difficult thing to talk about. And something that I often say is, I'm not saying that other people are bad. I'm not saying that
No.
they are not good people, but
Mm.
sometimes certain relationships are not good for me. And that is that we are just not in alignment. And you know what? Sometimes people don't want to be friends with me anymore. And sometimes it's like, oh, I really like them. But you know what? Let it go. Like, if
Yeah.
someone is making a decision for themselves, just as I make decisions for myself, I have become a lot more comfortable with, that's what it is. I'm not going to run up on people and try to be like, what's wrong? They have decided. I have decided this is what's happening. And the best thing that you can ever do is accept it and kind of work with it. But I think it's become so interesting as we become more lives online. I think when we lived lives more offline, people were in your world when they were in it, and then when they weren't, they were gone. And now we almost collect friends like Pokemon cards. So we're just collecting people, and there's never a sense of letting go. And I think sometimes there has to be, and Selena Barker, who's the coach who we both know, and she was saying it's like ships, you just let them out. You just have to let people
Yeah.
out. But
Yeah.
it's like we've become afraid of not having anyone. We're afraid of missing out on social experiences. But it seems that everything is about, how can you hold on? And
Yeah.
sometimes you shouldn't be holding on. I
No.
know for facts there's been some friendships that I held on to longer than I should have. And when they ended, they did not end well. Because when there was a natural point of distance, I or
Yes.
they were not willing to let go. Same with
Yeah.
romantic relationships. how can we navigate that really difficult process of creating space? Because when you let these things go, what you're actually doing is you're creating space for what should be.
Absolutely. Well, firstly, I'd like to say that what you're talking about is very symptomatic of a culture that is rooted in scarcity. Everything is about there's not enough, and if you have it, that means I can't have it. So we see that play out all over the place. Secondly, the narrative we have been fed about friendship is friendship never ends. Like we're going to be friends forever, right? So we treat friendship in a different way than we do romantic relationship, and we also do the same for romance. We forget that romance is also built on a friendship. So it's that piece about it's not about using. So it's not about being transactional. Okay, you're no good to me anymore. I can't get anything out of you, so you've got to go. I've got plenty of friends who it's not about what they do for me, it's about who they are. I know that I could knock on their door at any time. We're not going to talk about business. We're not going to talk about what I think about intersectional feminism, but we are going to cackle till I feel like I'm going to wet myself. And if I'm tired, there'll be a bed for me to have a nap in. And when I wake up, there'll be some nice kind of soup with hard food or something like that available for me to have. So that's that. But we also have to recognize exactly what you said about no longer being in alignment. We can either recognize that sometimes we outgrow things, and it's not that the thing was bad or that there was a immediately identifiable problem, but there's a sequence of things that are ongoing and seem to be compounding that are making this relationship untenable. It's better for us to have the memory of that than degrade the memory by holding on. Another thing is, our society conditions us not to value space and spaciousness. If it's in a property, absolutely fine. But within ourselves, we've got to be stuffing ourselves with stuff all the time. That's the reason why we find it hard to rest, because we're supposed to be doing all the time. That's the reason why people find it hard to take time off work, because unless you're taking time off work to go to an appointment or go on holiday, it's a waste of time. But we need that space. We need to be able to just see what's around us and to assess. And what we also know is that when you let go of something, you make space for the new stuff to come in, whatever that may be. Case in point, I let go of a very tricky, close relationship that should have been let go of, whatever that means, not whatever that means, that should have been not let go of, but actually this needs to fade a very long time ago. And I didn't do that. The moment I decided, you know what, I'm not going to hold on anymore. I'm going to let go. Whatever will be. Not being avoidant, not avoiding conflicts, nothing of the sort. But you know what, I'm not holding on anymore. I met people like you.
There you go.
So I
What a
think we have to
win.
recognize that when we hold on, we
Mm.
deny ourselves of the room we need to grow.
And it is part of the evolution of life. And I think there's change is another thing that people kind of we can't decide whether change is good or bad or
Yeah.
makes us feel uncomfortable. Last year I went through a big like weight loss transformation, huge. I knew being overweight was partly me hiding. It's partly me
Hmm.
hiding from doing the things that I knew I wanted to do or that I should be doing with my time, and I couldn't do them because I didn't feel very comfortable. I didn't want to go here, I didn't want to go there, and it was
Yep.
like become like an excuse. So I said to myself, you know what? You have to let yourself run out of rope. You absolutely have to just let yourself run out of rope and run out of
Yeah.
road, and there's nowhere else to go. And now that's not an issue. Now what's the problem with
Yeah.
you going after doing the things? There's no problem now. So now what? Now you face
Yeah.
yourself, because
Literally.
deep down I understand about the things that I want from my life and the things that I need to achieve in my life. I understand. And so, but it has been so interesting seeing how that transformation then plays out in your relationships, and making that then has a ripple effect on how your friends and how everyone is seeing you, perceiving you, dealing with you, what that's bringing up in them, your
Yes.
renewed vigor for life, your renewed
Yes.
bounce. Some
Yes.
people, they find it hard, they find it tricky. And so part
Yeah.
of my reevaluation was, okay, well, really now I've made the decision to not give myself any excuses. I know that life's going to go up. So I can't have people who can't even cope with this version of me. Now, the other version of me was trying to make space for them,
Yes.
making sure they felt comfortable,
Yes.
in my presence, in what I'm doing, that they're still being included, and now, like you say, it is not about the fact, okay, you're of no use to me anymore. But what it is about is, do you love me enough? Do you respect me enough? Are you my friend? Do you like me? Also, because some of your friends don't like you, facts. Do you like me enough to live with this version of me, to
Mm-hmm.
welcome this version of me? Because
Mm-hmm.
actually, and sometimes we all also need to ask ourselves that question for our friends when
Yeah.
they go through their life evolution, when they have a child, when they get married, when they get the promotion, when they have more money, less money. Are you ready to
Yeah.
welcome, love, honor, respect, be loyal to this version of them?
Yes.
And sometimes we'd be better off being like, actually, not for me.
Yeah.
Leave them alone. Let
Yeah.
them evolve and live. And I think myself, leave me alone. If you don't like me, please leave me alone. Let
Yeah.
me get on with what I'm doing, but don't be in my boat, drilling holes in the bottom, waiting to see how much water's going to come up, see if we all sink together. I really do not want that in this
Mm.
next chapter of my
Mm.
life. And part of that is about, quote unquote, owning your power. But
Yeah.
which is a very, very popular phrase. But I know there are some people who are going to be listening now being like, this all sounds really like great and yay. How do I do it?
Kristen Neff, world's well-known number one possibly person in relation to self-compassion, she wrote a book called Fierce Compassion. So what we're talking about here is fierce compassion. And one of the things that struck me in that book was where she talks about things like, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement being an example of fierce compassion. My compassion is so fierce, I'm going to stand up for and advocate for what's right. So when we're talking about this, it's not all kumbaya, la, la, la. Sometimes we have to stage an intervention with ourselves and hold ourselves to a higher standard. So, what I invite you to do in terms of the how, what does friendship look like to be able to support that standard? And then what do they need to be like to be able to uphold that standard for other people?
That is
Like
deep.
literally, you can write it down like a job description. When I did it for myself, I literally got a job description template from the internet. And what I could see in the friendship I referred to earlier on when I let it go, part of me holding on was me trying to find a way for that person to be who I wanted and needed them to be. That's not it. So I was like, right, if I need you to hold space for me as I am, I need to hold space for you as you are. And that's when it became very clear that we're not at that place where those spaces can be held. And sometimes that is what it is. We need to own that. All relationships are a two-way street. We both pour into relationships. And what had happened in that relationship was when we do work on ourselves and we start to embody who we are authentically, our nervous system changes. We're no longer operating in the fight, flies, freeze, fawn circle that a lot of us come to inhabit. So that has become the subconscious, social, psychological, and biological contract we have created with our friends. So when we're operating differently, none of us realize it because you don't go along and say, I'm going to do this work and I'm going to like annoy all of my friends. No, we don't really know this consciously, but we can feel it, but we can't explain it because we're not even feeling it like in our brains. We're feeling it throughout, the rest of our bodies. What's happening is we are all experiencing a change and a shift. It's much deeper than what we're seeing and hearing, and we can't articulate it. So we have a natural inbuilt negativity bias that teaches us to fear uncertainty, to fear change. So instantly we now fear what's going on. But because we don't know what's going on and we can't own it, we're going to make you a bad person. Genelle's a bad person. She thinks she's better than us. Genelle's a bad person. She's judging us because she's read these books and she's been to these seminars. So, and she's even written her own book. But what's going on beneath that is the contract we created that is like the mycelium network beneath the surface of where we operate. It's shifting. So now there's tectonic plates moving and we don't know what's going on. So again, I'm saying that to affirm. On the odd occasion, people are bad,
Yeah.
but more often than not, it's not that the person is bad. We just don't understand what's going on. That is what it is. And very often, we think about things like we need friendships where we need people that enable us to be vulnerable and share our problems and the inner machinations of our childhood trauma. That's easy. The real test of friendship is when you're growing. The real test of friendship is when you say, I have got this idea that feels like it's so huge, I still want to do it. And the person start, are you sure? Do you want to? All of that, like that is the real test. Why? Not because they are a hater, even though sometimes on the odd occasion they can be. You have decided to step out of survival and start thriving. And that's a threat to a nervous system that is oriented and committed to surviving. So we could, like, when we know this, when we know that it is part and parcel of how we're biologically wired, we can start to leave people in their own process. I accept you're living your life, you're center stage in the life you want. I want to be center stage in Wembley Stadium, speaking to the masses, inspiring them, teaching them, getting rapturous applause, and people telling me months later they applied what I talked about and they've changed their lives. Other people don't want to do that. That's fine.
And I think it is about understanding, like, it's okay. And like you say, so the friendship alignment isn't necessarily that we both want to be on the stage at Wembley. Like, that is not what makes people align. And I think that's what sometimes people think it is. Well, I need to be around other successful people. It's not always that. Like you say, it's about
No.
people who want to know you on the inside, want to
Yes.
respect that, honor, hold space for it. It's not
Yeah.
about being the same.
No.
And I think that's sometimes where we kind of get things wrong. And people say, oh, well, now she's got that new job. She's got like new friends. Well, sometimes the alignment is we're doing very different things, but we all just want to become the top of what we do. But it's not the same thing.
Literally,
But
we're
we
growth
just
minded.
all growth minded. We're trying to make more money, whatever that is. And it doesn't have to look the same. I remember once when I took over a team and someone said, oh, there's just some people in this team who are just so lazy. They just, they never have any ideas. They just come to work and just like do their jobs and go home. And I said, listen, every place needs those people. Let me tell you that
Absolutely.
right now. I said, everybody
Yeah.
can't want to be in charge. And everyone can't
Exactly.
want to be bringing the
Yeah.
ideas. I said,
Yeah.
you need people who will execute in a team. And for me, as a manager, I've never actually minded if a job is not their life, if they're not as committed as I am. I don't actually expect that. What I
No.
expect is you to do your job, the job you're being
Absolutely.
paid to do,
Yeah.
with some kind of civility and some kind of, good naturedness. But actually to attack it the way I attack work, no. But a level of productivity at your job you're being paid to do, absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think, again, this is the way we look at things, very binary, that if people are not giving their all to their job, if they go home at 5, they're like bad people. No,
No.
they're just doing it differently. And actually
Yeah.
sometimes that person who's like going at 5 and another person who's like head down hardcore worker actually get along really, really well because they both understand what they're there to do and they are
Absolutely.
doing that. And I
Yeah.
think it comes back to what we were saying before about when you know you're not doing what you want to do. I think a lot of people take out that frustration on other people who are.
Hmm.
And I think it's one of the most unfair things that I see. That dream can be yours if you're willing to work for it. But if at this point in time you are not willing to put yourself out for your own dream, that is work for you to do. And
Yeah.
another thing that I think a lot of people confuse is like, but I love myself. I think loving yourself and working on yourself are two different things. I do love myself, but there have been times when I have not worked on myself or when I have not worked on the dreams that I want to do. And so the loving myself has not been enough. I've needed more. I've needed to
Yeah.
progress. I've needed to push. So like last year when I did that big weight loss thing, not that I didn't love myself, not that I hated myself. No, but I wasn't working on myself, I wasn't enabling myself to be my full self. And that
Yeah.
is really something, an inside job for me, and not
Absolutely.
something that I can outsource to other people. In thinking about kind of this kind of thing on the work side, when we think about change, we're just talking about like growth mindset. I see all the time people talking about hustle culture not being on trend. Now, I've like got a news flash for some people. For some people, hustle culture is not a trend. It is something they have to do to pay their bills and to survive. And it's not an option. It's how they're going to get through the next month, the next few weeks. But how can we also prioritize our own well-being in a world that is geared towards doing more and more and more and more and more, where some people actually do need to hustle, and
Yeah.
accessing self-care can look very, very different depending on how much money you make, the spaces you have access to, the time you have. What would be something that you would say to people about how they still prioritize themselves in that?
First of all, it's about knowing, what do you need? What do you want? What does life need to look like and feel like in order to meet those needs? I don't really ascribe to hustle culture. Like, I was a fully paid up member of Girl Boss Society. I was in there, Genelle. I was in there working till whatever time. I remember my mum asking me to come round because she wanted to talk to me about something. I was hoping that it was a bit of like suku suku about my brother or my sister. No, it wasn't. My daughter had said to her, sometimes when she wakes up to go to the toilet, she can hear, because I used to have acrylic nails, my nails tapping on the laptop. And then I tell her off for any old thing. So my daughter was expressing that she knew I was tired and therefore irritable, and spoke to my mum about it. And my mum came to speak to me about it. So it's something that just makes me feel a little bit, because I know where it got me. But I am a believer that there are many times that we need to work really hard. We have got a sympathetic nervous system for a reason. We can crank up the gas when we need to, because that's what we need to start that catalyst that then enables us to go into momentum and then cruise control. I think that there are many times that we do need to really accelerate in order to get to where we need to go. That's it, period. But what I noticed was, when I was operating, and also let me be clear, I'm not somebody who is struggling to pay my bills, etc. I think that's something that's very different. But what I know to be true is, part of my hustle, girl boss drive at that time was because I was feeding into arbitrary success metrics that didn't actually align with a level of success that makes me feel like, oh, life feels satisfying. So I was having a conversation with somebody online. It was something about having a goal of making $1 million a year. And I said, that's a really nice goal and it makes a really great soundbite, but I don't need that. I've calculated the revenue I need to make in my business so I can pay myself the salary I need to pay myself to live a life that feels really juicy, expansive, and satisfying. And it's not £1 million. So it's about being really clear. What does living a good life, a great life, mean to you? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What are the things you're doing? How do you live from the moment you wake up in the morning to you go to bed? What's the quality of your sleep like? All of those sorts of things. And then you'll be guided by that. And you will find that a lot, like when people talk about all kinds of things like funnels and this and that and the other, I don't really like. I would like to do that because it's going to create more ease for me, but I don't need to do that as in I need to do that because I've got this goal. So I think it's about really understanding what makes life feel supportive, expansive, juicy, pleasurable for you, and allowing that to be your guide rather than following these metrics that really don't mean anything to you and have you chasing a target that's going to be moving all the time. What I found was, as soon as I got remotely close to whatever that target was, I'd moved on. I wasn't satisfied by it. I was achieving great things, but it didn't mean anything to me because I was literally mentally ticking it off the list and on to the next one. What is more important to me than on to the next is doing the thing, being present with the thing, savoring and enjoying the thing, and then moving on to the next. So, for everything I've said, be clear about what your goals are. Why do you want that? How is it going to support the life you want to live? For me, I'm not here to work for the sake of working. I'm here to work so I can live a good life.
For me, one of the really important things is I have to have a day a week where I can go and play golf. Like, that is, I have to earn enough money on the other days I'm
Yeah,
working so that I know there's at least 4 working days of the month that I'm not working. I am playing
yeah.
golf and I'm at the golf and I'm doing that all day. And it is just so interesting because I guess there's 2 more questions that I've kind of got. Hopefully we can fit them in. But what
Mm.
about people on the other side? And I've been there myself, when you're kind of lethargic in life. Actually, there are things that you want to do, but there's just a lack of momentum in your person to actually go and do it. People say to me that I always seem really busy, and I'm like, really? Because some days I can tell you I have watched about at least 2 seasons of a show
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
not really
yeah.
done much at all. But what about people on the other side? They know what they want, but there's just not that engine.
I think it's much more to do with the fact that as human beings, we're cyclical. We're not supposed to have our engine on revving all the time, because that would be like trying to go from London to Scotland and constantly like accelerate, accelerate, accelerate. When you drive down the motorway, you accelerate, you go in the fast lane to do whatever it is you need to do. And then you go back into which, like, I don't drive all the way on the fast lane. And I think that's the same for life. So I think, firstly, we need to accept that life is cyclical. We're not supposed to be going at full speed all the time. That's a fast track to burnout. Second of all, sometimes when we're trying to force something, it's because it hasn't really germinated and taken root. So the more we're trying to force it, the worse we're making it. So sometimes we just have to leave things well alone and give things the time. One of the major blocks I see as a coach to people accomplishing their goals is they give their goal a really limited time scale, coming from a place of scarcity, rather than thinking, this is the goal I want to achieve. What is the time scale this goal needs in order for me to achieve it? So there's a quote by Bill Gates that says something along the lines of, people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in a decade. So actually looking, this thing that I want to bring into fruition, how long does it need, rather than coming from the place of scarcity? And that's the next thing. If I was coming from a place of not like infinite abundance or any of those things, but if I was coming from a place of knowing, of certainty, that I've got time, I've got the skills, I'm the person to do this thing, how would I approach this thing? Because a lot of the urgency we place on things isn't true urgency. The last thing I'd say is, do you really want to do it? Because what our mind tells us we want to do and what we believe for ourselves can be two totally different things. Oh, I'm going to add one more. Get yourself an expansive friend like Genelle, so you can send WhatsApp voice notes and say, can you sound this out for me? What do you reckon's going on here? Because sometimes we spend too long in our heads going round and round and round, overthinking. We need to be able to have a friend that we can say, this roundabout is swinging too much. Can you just pause this roundabout and help me think this through and get another perspective? But harking back to some of the things we've spoken about earlier on, it has to be the type of person that is as ambitious for you as you are ambitious for you, because they're ambitious for themselves. You cannot ask for this type of support from somebody who isn't growth minded, and they're going to be finding all the things that could go wrong instead of helping you think about all the things that could go right. And I'm not talking about spiritual bypassing. I'm talking about somebody who can look at you as a holistic person and see you from a view of, in the words of the psychologist Carl Rogers, in unconditional positive regard.
And I think it is so true, because sometimes I know I don't really want to do something, like I'm forcing myself into doing something, and there's a few things I can think about right now in my business that are a bit like, oh, and in my heart I'm like, do you know what, I'm probably not as aligned with this in this time as I have been, and maybe I actually don't really want to do it, don't believe in it. And sometimes it is just that it's tricky and I need some outside support, make you better, make the idea better, make it sure it works, but also that they will just in general just give you support. And something that I'm really trying to do this year, and I'm not always great at, but I'm trying, is to give support without advice. Just, I know it's a challenge. I fail
Massive.
still, but to give people support without advice.
Yeah,
Because sometimes when someone comes to you with a big dream, your advice, as well-meaning as it is not helpful. And sometimes when
absolutely.
someone comes to you with a problem, your advice, as well-meaning as it is not actually helpful. And it's something that I find quite frustrating, actually, unsolicited advice. And so I'm actually trying to, what does it look like to give someone my full support? Them know that if they want, I will give them advice, but
Yeah,
I am not going to be piling in with, well, I think,
yeah,
or
yeah,
if it were down to me, or I just
yeah,
want to say, I am really
yeah,
trying to practice that this year,
yeah,
of being a better friend, a
yes,
better sounding board, and allowing people to know that I'm there should they have questions, should they want
yeah,
input, but
yeah.
to not rush to input, which is very, very hard.
I find it so hard, and I have to really, like, sometimes it happens without me thinking about it, because it's, something that can happen quite subconsciously, but I have to like hard stop myself sometimes. And that's why I like things like voice notes, because I start recording it and I'm like, oh, you're doing it. And it's like, Tamu, you don't know better than them. Like, you do not know better than them. And I just want to go back to the growth thing real quick. Sometimes we have to trust in the timing of life. And I don't mean that in a hocus pocus way, because sometimes what we're trying to do, we're trying to plant tulips in September, expecting them to blossom in January. That's not how it works. So sometimes we have to like trust in the right timing. There are a number of women I work with, and I don't really work with women in this stage of life that much anymore. They've got very young children and they look at me and what I'm doing, or they want to move through life as if they don't have dependent children who still wake up in the night, who still literally need them to feed them, etc. That's not the time to be doing some of the things you want to do. It's not going to run away. It's not going to expire. It just means you need to do that in a different season of your life. I'm in a season of my life now where I have an adult, technically an adult child. She's 18. I can have a slow morning. When she was 5, the morning wasn't slow because she needed help to get ready and all of those sorts of things. So we have to recognize the season we're in, the terrain we're in, and move accordingly. You will find it very difficult to climb Mount Everest with flip-flops on. That's for the beach. It's not the
And it's
time.
someone messaged me the other day and was like, oh, like you seem to be like on it so much, and like, how do you do it? I live by myself. I don't have any children. There's lots I can do myself with
Yeah,
no questions, no interruptions, no one. I can wake up every morning and work out at 6:30. That's because I've slept through the night. Well,
yeah,
I'm actually not a good sleeper, but because that's the way that my life is set up. So I'm not going to be giving you advice with your 2 young children. Even though I share my workouts quite often, I'm very careful to never be like, who's working out this morning? I share them because it's helpful for me and accountability for me. It's more for me
absolutely.
that I share it,
Yeah,
rather than to encourage or shame other people into, what are you
yeah,
doing this morning? We're all living very different lives. And if you do feel shamed or triggered, then that's a question for you to take back to yourself about the things that you
absolutely.
think you have time for. But I
Mm,
just find it very fascinating. And I know you've spoken about this before, but that we go for advice to people whose lives look nothing like ours. They're a man, they don't have a menstrual cycle that is sending
yes,
their energy and hormones skedaddling all month, every month, from the age of
yes,
like 11 until, that's a very, very real thing to
yeah,
affect the way that, and things like that affects, my workouts and things. But it's just really interesting that I think we're often looking for advice in places that is not relatable, not aligned, and is not going to be helpful. And not relatable because it's unrelatable, but not relatable because your life is looking very, very different from the way that person's life is set up. And so
absolutely.
my final question, I know because you and we have talked about this before, even ChatGPT has dragged me about my rates. You work a lot with women on, earning, under earning, visit. And I just want to know, what do you think are the biggest mindset blocks that you see holding women back from like fully stepping into their power and showing up consistently? And by consistent, I don't mean every day, a consistent pattern of showing up for themselves.
Because we equate our output to our worth. If we stopped equating our output to our worth, we would move very differently. So when we're thinking about things like, as business owners, undercharging, number one, we forget all the things we have done in terms of the study, the experience, etc., to develop our skill set. We forget that we are highly competent, so we take that for granted. And so we get into a space where we're taught that us doing all the time is where the worth is. So when we can start doing things really quickly, it's like, oh my goodness, I don't have the right to charge this amount of money because I haven't worked really, really hard. Forgetting that we've been working hard for a decade that has led to us being able to do what we're doing. So what we need to think about is, what is the value of my work? What does it do for that person? I work with people who, on a regular basis, will tell me that my work has changed their life. Life-changing work doesn't cost 500 quid, mate. And it's really that simple. The other thing is, sometimes it gets on my nerves, particularly when people in the coaching industry talk about things like this. We have associations with pricing. If you are doing bargain pricing all the time, you're going to get bargain hunters. And it's as simple as that. And people who are constantly seeking a bargain, not necessarily because they don't have the financial means, there's something going on about how they perceive themselves, and that's going to impact how they show up for the work. I remember there was a lady who wanted to work with me, and she kept going on and on about how expensive things were and the cost of this and that and the other, and not having much money and this like disposable income. And maybe she didn't have much disposable income, I don't know. But the way she behaved, I made an assumption based on the data she gave me. One day I went to a petrol station near where I live, but it's in the opposite direction of where I usually go. And in that little section, there are really big double fronted houses that tend to have gates. And I'd stopped for whatever reason and I heard my name. I turned around. It was this person in a double fronted house, electric gates, the latest Audi, big, gigantic, whatever it was. And I was like, oh, is this where you live? She said, yeah. So this person who was speaking like, I don't know what, I don't know, she could have maxed out her credit cards and everything else. But the way she presented herself and the life she was living, and I know that the houses on that road are much more expensive than many of the parts of the borough I live in. But her mindset was not aligned with somebody who was ready to come in and do the work and grow. And also, you've got to distinguish yourself. Don't come to work with me if you want someone to micromanage you, to hold your hand every step of the way, to be checking in with your to-do list, to be saying, have you shown up on social media today? That ain't me. I'm here for high-level strategic thinking. I'm here for people who want to be different so they can do different and have the impact they want to have. That is also reflected in the pricing because it is a higher level of operating, it's a higher level of being. And when we don't do that, we dishonor ourselves and we fall into taking ourselves for granted. It's okay if some people say no. They're not rejecting you as an individual, they're rejecting what it is you offer them. And quite frankly, I am on a mission to be a well rested woman. And in order to do that, I need wealth. I'm not going to get wealth from trying to serve everybody at the lowest price possible. I would much rather have a premium service with fewer people that pay a higher price point because they know that they're getting a service that is reflected in that way.
I think women, we tend to fall into this trap of worrying how much money other people have. I remember listening to a thing ages ago, I can't remember where I heard it. It was a man, and he just said, other people's money is not your problem. So if someone can't afford your product, they're not your customer, and you need to go to the customers. And, you know, in every sector, there are people who charge less and who offer those
Go to
things.
them.
There's and so for me, like some people like, oh, when people charge less, it devalues. I just see it as more there's someone for everyone. So for
Yeah,
some
that's
people,
it.
like that's the price that's their
Yeah.
entry. And I also believe in accessibility at all price points. So I'm never mad when people do it at a lower price, but you
No,
probably
me
are
either.
getting a different service as long as you know that. But for me, you know, like I was saying to you, I went to Chat GPT and, you know, I was just like, oh, this is what I'm thinking of charging. What do you think? It was like, well, for your years of experience and for the service that you're offering, for the things that you're doing, I would suggest, and it's probably about a third of the price on top at the lower end of what it told me. And it was
Yeah,
just so interesting because I know the way that AI is programmed, that was probably looking at the earnings of a man as the average
100%.
earning, which is what it is. Once I was asked to give a talk and there was two of the men on the panel and they said, oh, well, how much do you charge? And I said, well, just charge me what you're paying the men. whatever you're paying the men.
Simple.
And the person came back and said, oh, well, no, they're doing different price. I said, oh, well, one of their prices. In the end, I didn't end up doing it because they're a nice person. I said, you know, but you know that women often don't know how much to charge, often are undercharging. And I get that you probably have a budget line attached to this event. And so, of course, you want the best price you can for your
Yeah.
money. But with myself, good conscience, looking after myself, I don't think that I want to do that if you won't tell me how much you're paying the other people, because I don't think that's fair. It's like it's a panel talk. So I didn't end up doing it in the end. But that's, for me, I have become much more over time. Look, I'm standing on business. And I think this is the other thing why we need to not see ourselves as our business, even if you are the brand face of your business.
Yeah,
Because if you see yourself as your business, everything around money feels very personal. When
absolutely.
actually a lot of it is just a business decision. Sometimes I have not gone with someone a business decision. The money
Yeah.
doesn't quite match what I'm looking for, or they don't seem the quite right fit for the service that I'm trying to get. So I think it's hugely important, I think, especially for women and some
Mhm.
men, to extract ourselves from our businesses in that personal way. You run a business, you are not
Yeah,
your business. You're
exactly.
running, and if you're running a business, you run it like a business. And
Absolutely.
being
Because
polite.
otherwise you don't have a business. And I just want to say really quickly, the other day, somebody approached me about being interviewed for some brand event, something or the other. And I was like, oh, well, how do I price it? Because it's different to what I do in corporate, blah, 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 blah. And I thought, my price is my price. And they didn't come back to me. And I was just like, okay, because I haven't lost anything. It's not as if I had that booking or I had that money. So we've got to remember, if we say our price for something and we don't get it, we haven't lost anything. Genelle, you know, I'm a homebody. I like my house. So if you're going to say no, I can just stay where I like to be. And if I'm going to leave where I like to be, let it be worth my while.
I'm often saying that I'm inside enjoying my mortgage. So as I'm working
Thank
so
you
hard
so
for it,
very
I'm
much.
enjoying my mortgage in my house on the weekends. What you do, I'm enjoying my mortgage. Thank you.
That's it.
This is what we need to do. For women, women of colour, any minority group, we need to raise our economic power. That is the way that you get things, sadly, because we do live in the society that we live in that is
Yeah,
run by money. And so the
absolutely.
thing for us, when we don't earn enough, when we under earn consistently, we consistently are left out of rooms, left out of decision making, left out of bodies, committees, regulatory. We are not in those spaces because we're not
Hmm.
showing up in the sector. And so I always
Exactly.
think it's hugely important for us that we don't under earn. And like you say, someone might decide, well, actually, at the rate I'm earning, 3 days a week is enough for me to live the life that I want. So I'm not trying to work 5 days, but
Yeah,
it's the economic power that you have in those 3 days that will determine. And it's always a tricky thing, not how you see yourself, not your worth, but your worth in a sector has a
absolutely.
number, a value attached to that.
Yeah.
And so something that I'm always thinking for myself, I was talking to someone the other day and she was like, oh, she's talking about maybe working together and she's asking me some about prices. And so I told her, she's like, oh, that's really strong pricing. And I was like, yeah.
Oh, I like that.
And I like the term she used, like strong pricing, but I know what she was saying to me was like, because I'm an independent consultant and it is strong pricing, but I stand on my experience. Like I
Yeah.
absolutely stand on my experience. And obviously that was the chat GPT pricing as well. So I stand on my experience in chat GPT. Thank you for that. And final, like this year, I'm embracing what I'm calling delusional ambition. This is my year of
Mm.
Delulu. I have decided, I'm trying to chase the things I want without much overthinking and just be kind of, doesn't matter how wild it is, I'm just kind of putting it out there and being like, I really want to do that. Any advice for anyone else who is thinking, do you know what, I just want to go after the big thing, and I'm not going to overthink it. I'm not going to be like, well, how am I going to make that happen, because that's often where we get tangled.
My advice, as it has been requested, it's not unsolicited, is I could say all kinds of things, but what I'll say above everything, strenuous movement. Move your body in a way where you are cultivating healthy stress. Polyvagal theory, which is somatic theory, I absolutely love, teaches us that your story follows your state. So the narrative you have about yourself follows your physical state. If you want to create unreasonable, uncompromising success, move your body in accordance with that. So you and I, we love a bit of strength training. It might be that. It might be, okay, cool. I've wanted to get to squatting 70 kg. I'm going to work towards that. You might not be that way inclined, but it could be, I usually do 5,000 steps a day. I'm going to work towards my new minimum number of steps a day being 10,000. So do whatever you're going to do to support your body growing, because then you're going to have the somatic experience of growing. You're going to be discharging stress in a really healthy way, and you're going to be keeping promises to yourself. That's something we really need to have. We're backing ourselves, and then our body's going to back us back.
I must say, I always meditate after I do my workout. That is my new thing. I used to meditate when I woke up in the morning, but I was half asleep and sometimes falling asleep, sometimes whilst
Same,
doing it. And so
same.
now I've switched to, I do my cool down, I stretch, and then I
Yeah,
lay down on the mat, and then I put on the meditation, and then I kind
yeah,
of do that, because I have found I'm almost far more active and engaged in the meditation. So sometimes I don't always stay laying down. Sometimes I halfway through, I'll like sit up, I'll start watching the screen, I'll start saying it. But actually, I have found that
yes,
mentally my body is just more expansive.
yes.
I'm feeling good because I've worked out,
Hmm.
I've moved my
Hmm.
body, I know, or even if I've just stretched, I've done something good for my body to
Yeah,
keep it mobile, keep it supple. And I feel like then my mind is actually in a really positive state to receive whatever it is
absolutely.
that I'm now thinking I want to have. And the final
Yeah.
thing, because I've said it about 3 times now, for all that we've discussed, and I think a lot of it centers around kind of what I would call almost positive productivity. It is a very
Hmm.
positive, joyful productivity. It's not
Yes,
about a grind. It is about mind, body connection, really moving towards the things you want, and also relationships and everything kind of moving with it, which I just love. What is an area of compassion for people? And what is an area of challenge for people who are now thinking, do you know what? I want to stretch, I want to grow, I want to be more, I want to be what I think I can be deep down inside, the person I'm dying to be. I want to
yeah.
be that person. Compassion and challenge.
A challenge would be, in order for you to experience that growth you want to, you need to do less. And that's a massive challenge for us. You need to do less and you need to leverage more. The less you do, the more you're going to grow. That's facts. And then compassion, something that floats around in my environment that I see people, whether it's online, people I work with, is this thing about being behind, wasting time, not using time efficiently. I want you to give yourself compassion for that, because whatever you went through got you to who you are and how you're being today. And there's a lot of gold in that. Don't dismiss it.
I love that challenge because as you know, I'm obsessed with golf. And sometimes when I'm playing, the tireder I get is the more I try. And that's like not helping the swing. So the more that I'm tired is the more I'm trying to force it. I'm trying to make this swing happen. I'm trying to hit the ball harder, and I'm missing it more. I'm getting more of the ground, because it's almost like I'm not in any sense of flow. I'm not in any state. I'm doing the most, and
Yes,
I'm getting, and it's more frustrating. It's like a downward spiral. So I love that,
yes,
because actually when I know, okay, let me just think about the techniques. What's the movement? I don't have to put all this energy behind it. I'm tired. Let me use
yes,
technique. The technique will
exactly.
do what it needs to do rather than the physicality. So I
Yeah.
love that. And I have loved talking to you today. Thank
Me
you so much for
too.
joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been invigorating.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I think it was really interesting hearing Tamu's perspectives on everything from productivity, joy, the world we're living in, the state that we're in. Like she said, it's so easy to be drawn into hysteria and into just running around and doing, and be drawn into the chaos, but actually to take a step back from that and to be grounded in self and looking for real solutions to some of the problems that we face, some of which are economic and some of which are aligning ourselves with people and causes that we believe is going to push this world further. And I always find it interesting exploring the topics of friendships and how they align with our lives or not, and the things that we can do to move ourselves forward. As ever, I hope you found this episode interesting. I hope that if you did, that you share it with someone that you like, you follow, that you subscribe, and that you just take a moment to reflect on what this episode means to you. What is it that you're pushing for? I like some of the pointers that Tamu gave, like writing a job description. What are your standards? What kind of things are you looking for in a friend, and what kind of things do you want to bring to a friendship? But also just thinking about how to bring that compassion and challenge to yourself as you push on and grow, so that you don't burn out and you don't give everything or overgive and leave nothing for yourself. So do tune in to the next episode of Repeat That Again, please. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, follow. Every single one of those actions means so much to me, and it also helps to spread the work that I'm doing and that you are also a very active part of. So thank you for listening, and until the next time, I hope that you have a great week.